Welcome back to the next episode of the Principles of Training. Today we're going to talk about the principle that I call don't go to bed angry. So the principle of don't go to bed angry, to do with horse training, has to do with the fact that if your horse gets uptight during the training, starts to get uptight during the training, that you empty that uptightness back out. You get rid of that tension, you get rid of that worry, and you get your horse back to relaxed before you go further ahead. Now, the human version of don't go to bed angry, I'm sure if you're married, at your wedding you had an older, wiser family friend offer you some advice. They go, now, let me tell you, Sonny, there's one thing you need to know about being married. Don't go to bed angry. Okay, and what that really means is if there is any tension build up between the two of you during the day, sit down, talk about it, discuss it, get it out in the open and get rid of it. Put it to bed. Get rid of that tension there, and then you go to bed, you wake up the next morning, everybody's happy. We're not bringing yesterday's arguments into today's arguments because we've resolved them. I mean, and that's another bit of marital advice people get given too, is don't bring up, when you're having an argument, don't bring up old arguments. But it's very easy to bring up old arguments if you didn't put them to bed in the first place. So I'll give you a good example with horses before I get going here. Recently I was in England doing some clinics and a girl said to me, my horse is stupid. And I said, really, why? And she said, well, the other day I went for a ride. They call it hacking out. She was trail riding. I was hacking out and a rabbit ran out of the grass and it didn't really bother him. He kind of just looked at it, but it didn't really bother him. And then he went along a bit further and another rabbit ran out of the grass and he looked at it and didn't really bother him. And then a bit further, another rabbit went out of the grass and it didn't really bother him. And we'd been riding for an hour or so and there must have been 12 different rabbits came out of the bushes and he kind of just looked at them, but it didn't really do anything silly. And then the 13th rabbit ran out of the bushes, and when it did, he went, ah, and he freaked out, spun around and ran home and bucked me off. Like he'd seen 12 rabbits that day. What was the problem? He must be just stupid. And I go, no, he's not stupid. What would have happened was the first rabbit scared him a little bit and he held on to that bit of worry. Okay, and then he went along a bit further and another rabbit scared him a little bit and he held on to that worry. He didn't let it back down. And then the third rabbit and the fourth rabbit. And this horse's capacity must be 12 rabbits of worry. And once you get over that, that horse overflowed and off he went. There's a trainer from Arizona named Harry Whitney, and he talks about your horse's worry cup. He says your horse can handle a cup full of worry. Your worry cup is this big. And he says your job is to have your horse's worry cup as empty as possible. Okay, so when he says your horse can handle a cup full of worry, he means your horse can contain a cup full of worry. He can hold it in. But once your horse's worry cup overflows and there's more worry than he can hold in, that's when you get a buck, a rare, a bolt, a spook, or whatever. And your job is to keep your horse's worry cup as empty as possible. I guarantee you this horse's worry cup is this big, and it went along and it saw one rabbit and then it was here. It saw two rabbits and it was here, and it saw three rabbits and it was here, and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, 8, 9, 10, finally got to 12 rabbits, and that horse can control itself. But one more rabbit's going to send it over the edge, and that one more rabbit jumped out and the horse spooked, ran off, and now the girl thinks her horse is an idiot. So how do you go about getting rid of all your rabbits in the training of horses? Well, the big thing is, for me, it all starts with the groundwork. When I'm doing the groundwork, you're doing either one of two things. You're either desensitizing your horse or you're sensitizing your horse. You're teaching your horse things they need to respond to, and you're teaching them things they need to not respond to. And how you go about that is the same way we deal with anxiety in humans. You know, my wife has anxiety and she has panic attacks. I'm sure it's very common these days. I'm sure everybody knows someone who has anxiety or has panic attacks or both. And when we first got married, I was not aware my wife had panic attacks, and or she had anxiety really. And we'd only been married several months, and she woke me up in the middle of the night, and she kind of was pointing to her chest, and she's like, "I need to go to the hospital now." And I said, "Why? Do you have pain? Is it hurting?" She goes, "No." I said, "Well, you're not hurting." She goes, "No, but I need to go to the hospital now." I said, "Well, what's wrong?" She goes, "I just need to go to the hospital now." I said, You're not hurting, you're not bleeding." "No, I just need to go to the hospital." And I wasn't sure what was going on. So I took her to the hospital, and the doctor looked her all over, and he said, he was thinking maybe it was a chest thing too, and so he took her pulse and her blood pressure and did an EKG and all that sort of stuff. And in the end he looked at her and he said, "There's absolutely nothing wrong with you." And she kind of turned to look at me and she goes, "I think I'm going to die." You know, when you're having a panic attack, you are pretty sure you are going to die, and it's hard to come back down from that. And so for the last 20-something years, my wife has suffered from these things, and she's never really had an answer for it. And then beginning of last year, she looked up online, she found a webinar or something on exercises to help herself deal with her panic attacks. It's a cognitive behavior therapy technique. And what she was supposed to do was, one day when she was completely relaxed, like get herself really relaxed, she's supposed to sit down and she's supposed to think about something that makes her a little bit upset, okay, a little bit worried. She's got this little dog that she just loves, and I imagine she'd probably sit down and think about him being sick. And so she starts out completely relaxed and she thinks about something that gets her a little bit upset. And as soon as she gets herself a little bit upset, what she's supposed to do is she's supposed to focus on her breathing. Breathe in for 4, out for 7, in for 4, out for 7. Mentally focus on those numbers, or mentally focus on deep breathing down into your abdomen, all that sort of thing, that mental focus, until she's completely relaxed again. Once she gets completely relaxed again, what she's then supposed to do, she's supposed to think about something that gets her a bit bothered again. And when she gets a bit bothered, as soon as she gets bothered, she's got to focus on her breathing and get back down. And initially when she did that, initially when you do that, it would take time for her to get down from being a little bit up, because she's not used to it. But after a while, the whole thing is you're supposed to be able to get yourself a bit bothered and boom, immediately comes straight back down. It gets easier. And then what you do is you get yourself a bit more bothered. You think about something even worse, and then focus getting back down from that. And it's basically the same thing we do with the horses, you know. All your desensitizing gets them relaxed. All your sensitizing gets them responsive, but every time you get them responsive, they're going to get a little bit anxious. And so what you do along the training along the way is, as soon as they get a bit responsive and get a bit anxious, you relax them and get them back down again. You get them chilled out to where they're not bothered by whatever it was you just did. And what happens is, after a while, you can get them more responsive, but come down quicker. You're really trying to reset their thermostat. So when my wife told me about that, I started telling that story about the cognitive behavior therapy at clinics, trying to tell people it's exactly the same thing. You expose these horses to a little bit of bother and make sure they can come back down from that little bit of bother. Hopefully at some point in time, they can come back down from a lot of bother. So I didn't mention before, but my wife has always had a problem flying. She's not a very happy flyer, but one thing she's never had a panic attack on a plane. Okay, can you imagine if you're scared of flying and you have a panic attack on a plane and you're stuck in this steel box 30,000 feet above the ground with no control over it? You're probably going to have a bit of a freak out. So luckily it had never happened. But so I started telling the story at those clinics, and I'd come home and I'd say, "So how's your cognitive behavior therapy going, honey?" And she said, "Well, I haven't really practiced it yet." I'm like, okay. So then I'd tell the story about the cognitive behavior therapy at the clinics again in relation to horses, and I'd come home and I'd say, "Hey babe, how's your cognitive behavior therapy?" And she goes, "I haven't really done it yet." And I said, well, you're not really going to get anything done with it if you don't practice it, you know. So last year we were in Canada traveling, and we flew from one place in Canada to another place, and it was about a 2.5 hour flight. I fly a lot, so I fall asleep before the plane takes off, and I wake up when the plane bounces to a stop. Robin, she doesn't though. But so we made this flight, and when the plane landed, I woke up and I looked at her and she looked kind of pale, and I said, "Are you okay?" She said, well, I am now. And I said, well, what happened? She said, I had a panic attack. And right then I was thinking, does my face have some scratches on it? Because she should have gone crazy. But she looked fine. You know, the flight attendants hadn't put a straitjacket on her or anything. So I was like, so what did you do? And she said, well, I've actually been practicing that cognitive behavior therapy just a little bit. And she said, so what happened was when I started to get the panic attack, I focused on my breathing and I got myself back down out of it. And that right there is the whole basis of all this training of horses. Is if you think about that situation right there, my wife had never had a panic attack on a plane. She'd never had a plane to practice getting down from a panic attack. All she'd be doing was getting herself up a little bit and getting herself down a little bit, and then getting herself up, you know, get that bit good, and then get herself up more and down until you can have big things happen and you can come back down quite easily. Recently we had a clinic here and there was a 17 two-hand, some sort of warm blood horse that was really worried about a lot of stuff. And one of the things that was really worried about was me just throwing a rope or anything like that over the horse's back. That took quite a while to get that horse good with that. And once it got good with that and could come back down from that, it didn't take all that long before I could actually take like Australian stock whip and crack it out here and get closer and closer to that horse with the noise and everything. But it was easy for the horse to overcome that bit. What was hard was the first bit, because that horse, when it got a little bit uptight, stayed uptight and didn't have a way to come back down. But it's basically, we did some cognitive behavior therapy with that horse and got it to where it could reset itself quite easily. Okay, so now what have we got now? We've got a perfect noisy 3 o'clock, a much noisier 3 o'clock than we had. So we're going to start counting all over again. You ready? See, I'm going to wait for him to, right there, he went to move and he stopped. That's a change. Where's Tom? That's not Tom. There he is. That was a change. Okay, he went, I'm going to go, hang on, maybe I shouldn't. As soon as he stops, I'll go, good idea. Okay, it's not, you are not what they call flooding. You know what flooding is? Flooding is desensitizing them to something, and it doesn't matter what they do, it won't go away. And they learn to shut down. They might not respond to it, but it doesn't mean they're good with it. They just, there we go, let it all out. Right? So flooding will happen when you desensitize them, and no matter what they do, you won't quit. What I'm trying to do is successive approximation. I'm trying to get him to where he figures out what to do with. Now last time, I think it was like the third or fourth time I cracked that, he went to move. That time I cracked it 4 times and he didn't move at all. So there's 3 o'clock, and now there's 2:45. And there's 2:30. I'm waiting for a blink here. Hey, there's a blink. What I'm going to do, I'll go back and go, hey, you remember this? But just remember, this is not about the whip. This has nothing to do with whips. This has to do with exposing him to something that will bother him and having him figure out how to deal with it. Okay. So the real benefit out of all this stuff is teaching your horse how to control their emotions. You know, in people there's IQ and EQ. IQ is intelligence quotient, how smart you are. EQ is your emotional intelligence, is what they call it, you know, the ability to control your emotions. And that's what we're trying to do with these horses, is teaching them to control their emotions. You know, the same thing applies teaching these young reining horses to spin. This is a greenish sort of a horse I'm riding. His name's Bundy, he's my horse. And as you can see, he's a little bit sweaty. I've been out here working on the spin, but you might notice, even though he's sweaty, he doesn't look like he's all uptight. He's pretty relaxed, and that just comes back to learning how, see that right there? Learning how to bring themselves back down all the way along. I mean, I really don't have to do much with him now as far as working and getting him back down. I've just been working on the spin right here and probably working on speeding it up just a little bit. I mean, he's still very green, but he goes around here. I might bump it with my foot a little bit, get a little more speed or something or other, adjust something here, adjust something there. But when I get done, he should be able to just do me a little blink right there. Just go back down. Okay, he's not very far along in the spin yet, but even when I add that pressure right there, as soon as I get done with that spin, we walk off and he's just la-di-da-di-da. And that's just something they learn all the way along. You know, when you're working on teaching these young horses to spin, it's almost like the mental ups and downs and the physical things all go at the same time. You know, like when you first teach them to spin, you might teach them to take one step. So how up do they get doing that? They don't get very up at all, you know. And after you can do one, then you can teach them to do two. And then you can teach them to do three. But you're only ever teaching them, you know, let's say 3 steps got him a little bit uptight. His worry cup got just a little bit worried. Well, after you do 3 steps and you sit here a second, it comes back down. It's just like Robin with her cognitive behavior therapy. When she's learning to do it, she doesn't get herself too far up before she gets herself back down. She doesn't go to bed angry. You come back and get yourself grounded. And like, there's a lot of different ways to teach the spin, but every single one of them probably have, you know, releases of pressure. You know, like whether you teach a horse to spin from a standstill like this, they take a step, you let go. You know, not that taking a step is going to make them uptight, but let's say it did, you let go, you give them a rub, they're back down again. There's, you know, there's that way of teaching to spin, and a lot of guys teach them to spin by just taking forward motion and redirecting it in a smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller circle until that forward motion becomes a lateral motion, and they come back out into the forward motion. When they come back out here, this is the let down thing. This is the relaxed part. This has come back to being chilled out sort of thing. And then they'll walk around and they might do it again. And you'll just take this forward motion, redirect it, make that circle smaller, 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 and then they start laterally, and then you can come back out of it. But there's a lot of up and down. It's not just spin, 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 spin. So it's, you know, all of the training. I think I mentioned before, some people say, oh, those reining horses, you're kind of lucky, they're quiet. Every bit of training we do with those horses, there's always working on that mental up and that mental down. It's not just a, you know, with the reining stuff either. It's with every discipline. And right now, probably the queen of the dressage, well, not probably the queen of the dressage, the queen of the dressage in the whole world is Charlotte Dujardin from England. I met her a couple of years ago, and 4 years ago she won the gold medal at the Olympics. The next year she won the World Championships. The next year she won the World Equestrian Games. The next year she won the European Championships, and then just this year she won the gold medal at the Olympics again. Her trainer and coach and mentor is a man named Carl Hester, and he actually owns the horse Vallegro that she, or half owns the horse Vallegro that she competed on and won all those gold medals on. And at the Olympic Games 4 years ago, she won the gold medal, and I believe he won the bronze on his horse, Nip Tuck. And so I'm not sure, I'd have to verify this, but I think it's probably the only time in the history of equestrian disciplines at the Olympics that one trainer has had 2 horses in the medals in the same Olympics. But anyway, so Carl Hester does some clinics, and someone went to a Carl Hester clinic last year and took notes when they were there, and came home and wrote a blog about those notes on the internet. And they actually scanned a couple of pages of their notes saying different things that Carl had said. And one of the things that, halfway down one side of the page, one of the things that Carl said was, your horse needs to be responsive. He needs to canter off your outside leg alone. Your canter shouldn't be outside leg, inside leg, 3 seat humps and a Hail Mary and Our Father and the God Save the Queen. They've got to canter and canter now, so they need to be responsive. But halfway down the other side of the page, somewhere in it, Carl said, if your horse starts to get hot doing any gait or during any movement, you need to return to the walk and walk on a loose rein until he's relaxed before trying it again. Okay, doesn't that sound like my wife's cognitive behavior therapy? When she gets herself uptight, she's got to get herself relaxed, and then what is she got to do? She's got to try it again. And that's how you build that horse's worry cup up. to where you can, you know, like I said, referring to the spin, that's how you can get those horses to where you can spin them a million miles an hour and stop, and they just go shh, because it's cognitive behavior therapy for horses. So hopefully this episode has given you an idea of how the principle of don't go to bed angry works, and how, you know, all good horse trainers tend to know that if your horse gets mentally up, you should get them back down, and really good horse trainers know that you should practice that mental transition a lot as a part of your training. So what we'll do in the next episode of the principles of training is we'll look at the principle of don't go to bed angry again, but I'll show you a lot more practical examples both on the ground and under saddles with an array of different horses. So join us next time on the principles of training.